Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Blue Stinger. In the last part, we technically finished our business here in Blue Market and got to the freezer, but we're immediately back at the specials floor because in between parts I did a little bit of grinding. I used the humanoid enemies near the weapon shop in the Hello Market to get that. That took me about 2 hours, but this is just to make sure the rest of the LP flows well because I want to get some steak plates to increase my health and heal when I need be. Plus, it'll allow us to access the special weapons room that you need 3,000 bucks or more to enter here on the second floor. Also, I should note, you always have to see that dialogue whenever you try to enter this place. Kind of annoying. Now, as for what you can buy in here, you got these two vending machines that sell the best ammo types in the game, be it napalm or the 2 types of rocket launcher ammo. And I think this one has Gatling gun, railgun ammo, and whatever the third one was. The big things of import, though, I believe, buying some more napalm just to prepare for something coming up, is the 3 vending machines in the back, which sell the best weapons in the game at sometimes at a slightly discounted price. Because you can get the Gatling gun here, the rail gun, which I'm going to find one later on anyway, so don't buy that one. It's not worth the 4K. But you can get one for free, at least. With that said, I'm not actively buying any weapons in here for now. I just wanted to show this place off because I have other priorities with my money. The only thing I came here directly for is the napalm ammo. My actual goal here on the 3rd floor is those steak plates, some extra large hassies, and by that I mean a metric shitload. I think I end the game with nearly 40 of them. As well as one particular weapon for Elliot, though I think I also get like the sumo shirt for dogs. The particular weapon for Elliot is what I personally consider to be his best weapon for a majority of the game, the Iron Fists. There is technically 2 melee weapons for him that are better for it than it. The Ray Sword we saw while in that special room, and one we're not going to see until like part 8 or 9. But the Iron Fists, I feel, are really good because not only are they high power compared to everything else we have at this point, but they're very fast to hit. They got some good knockback. They're good for comboing. The best way to describe them is that they are an extension of Elliot's own fists. So now his punch combo is faster, and it also just ends with more of a uppercuts than the roundhouse kick. And technically speaking, the roundhouse kick out of his basic melee attack is better for coverage because it's got more or less the same range Leon's roundhouse does in RE4. But the speed of these alone is just super worth it. With that said, let's now jump cut back to the freezer so we can pick off where we ended off last part. Welcome to the freezer. It's cold as hell in here. You might notice below my health bar there's now a new bar counting down. That's the temperature gauge. If that runs low or high, depending on the case, depending on which direction it's going, you'll start taking damage. There are rooms we can take periodical breaks in, thankfully, to avoid death by that. It's not locked, but the door is frozen shut. Well, shit.
Oh, this is unusual. Why is the door frozen? I've got to raise the temperature, or else we'll be frozen meat before we reach Rath's place.
You know, not for nothing, I actually kind of appreciate Dean Bristow for trying to put on a bit of a shiver to his voice there. Resident Evil would not have done that in this kind of instance, and I'm almost impressed by that. But yeah, there's a pseudo time limit here, but thankfully they put enough rooms that are out of the temperature gauge system, so to speak, that you don't have to worry about it at all. And even then, once your health starts draining, it drains pretty slowly. So you can either quickly use a healing item or otherwise. Also, sometimes unlocking doors does not feel as good as it should because you have to be far away from where the actual thing is. I usually try to be about a foot to the left, and that usually gets me activating the key cards a lot more consistently.
Freezer temperature control system. Clio pump rotation 6,500 RPM. Freezer mode has been engaged. Would you like to see the instruction?
Yes!
If you would like to change the temperature in the freezer, adjust the Clio pump rotation rate in the freezer control center. 0 to 4,999 RPM low rotation mode. This is defrosting mode. The temperature in the freezer will be increasing. 5,000 to 5,999 RPM freezing mode. This is the normal mode. 6,000 to 9,999 RPM freezing mode. This will bring the temperature to -100 centigrade. Avoid setting the mode as a default.
Those numbers there play into the quote-unquote puzzle that we're going to see at the end of the major portion of the freezer, so to speak. You're going to want to keep in mind those number ranges, particularly the range of 5,000 to 5,999. But also, you might not want to, as compared to most areas in the game, this area outright has two different ways it can play out depending on your actions within. And I'm showing both off, just that I'm showing one off before the other. The other important thing you need to grab no matter what, though, is you want to come in here and talk to the terminal within this room as well as grab the machine room key.
Freezer temperature control system. Heating express activation key. Use the invert key at the control center to activate heating express mode.
The invert key is what causes there to be two different scenarios that play out at the end of this area. Thankfully, though, no matter how you go through this area, the endings, the way where you end up and how you get there ultimately doesn't change, just what you face along the way. And I do like that this game tries to have unique little area gimmicks like that. There's a couple of unique hazards in certain places you need to do. With that said, I do wish they were a bit more straightforward and both not at the same time, because this game could use a little more maziness, but also just better level design, period. Also, what we got there was a portable heater that causes us to no longer start to freeze to death in areas. So now the freezer timer is just straight up gone, and they give you that for this next room, because otherwise you might end up taking a lot of freezing damage. I recommend taking out Elliot and his napalm gun, because you're going to need it for this very sudden and out-of-nowhere boss fight. This giant ice dinosaur, it's a slow and lumbering beast, but it can hurt. 2 or 3 notable attacks from memory. It has the fire breath it tends to do when you're straight in front of it. If you get near it, it likes to either bite you, I think it can do that at least, or it'll try to do a 360 spin with its tail. The reason the napalm gun is so effective here is not only does this particular enemy type take more damage from it to begin with, but because of its relative speed, the longer it's in the residue fire of the napalm gun, the more damage it takes. The only thing you need to watch out for really is the reloading animation with the napalm gun, because Elliot does certainly take his time with that. And due to how long it takes to use food items in this game, healing with a Hassie or the steak plate might just lead you right into more damage. With that said, you do need to fight this thing. You can't just walk past it because it holds I believe it's called the control room key, that we need to enter the next room. That's how they make you have to fight in most boss fights that are actual boss fights. They have a key card you need. You might notice a brief little fade transition here. There's a reason for that later on. Because now we're in the control room. This is where we need to use not only the information we got about the pump, but the invert key. Freezer temperature control unit. Heating express system is off. Use the invert key to turn on heating express mode. And it's here where the path branches. You can either keep the key in and just leave, which we'll be doing at towards the end of the part, or you can investigate the terminal again and remove the key. Heating express mode is off. Enter desired cryo pump RPM. We want to set the cryogenic pumps in the freezer to just straight up freezing mode, not deep freeze like they were to begin with. So enter a number between 5,000 and 5,999, and this area completely changes. Also, looking back, I probably should have entered the number 5309 just to make the obvious reference, but oh well. Weed number will work too, I suppose. The big thing that changes is the area is no longer deathly cold to Elliot and dogs. And in the case you didn't grab the heater for whatever reason, you would no longer be affected by it from my memory. It's just cold. You're not freezing anymore. And because of this, you can just walk straight through. Certain doors that were frozen are no longer frozen. With that said, no new enemies spawn, no enemies despawn due to this. This ultimately just changes the hazard you face and how two particular rooms we're going to see at the very end of the freezer play out, because we still have a little bit to go here, but it's more or less straightforward. Make sure before you continue on that you use this save room as well, because it also contains the map for the freezer, even though at this point we've explored most of it. The map system in this game, I don't use it too much, on screen at least, but I feel for newcomers it is at least useful enough. Similar with the vending machine system, as at least the cheap healing items like the large Hassie or even the hamburger, alongside the cheap ammo like shotgun or handgun or bowgun ammo, they're cheap enough that only a few enemies are required to kill for an extra clip. So maxing out those ammo reserves doesn't take too long at all, because there is a max you can hold of any given item. I think for most ammo clips, it's up to 9 of each. I forget what the max is for healing items. My brain wants to say somewhere around 50, but honestly, that could be wrong. You have almost no reason to hold that many outside of maybe large Hassies because they're so cheap. I think you can get a large Hassie almost for every single enemy you kill, period. With that said, though, since the doors are now frozen, we can go through here where we were earlier, the first door we saw that was frozen, and reach the end of the area. Just be careful of corners, though, because the game likes to sometimes hide enemies behind corners like that, be it that sudden humanoid, the humanoid getting up behind you, or that tentacle that's just beyond that other corner. And honestly, I never like it when horror games just hide things behind corners, because that's just dickish enemy placement. That's like in a Mega Man game, hiding an enemy directly below a screen transition on a ladder. Like, why would you do that? Oh, hi, Nephilim. This next room is where the major changes happen, depending on whether or not you just left the invert key in or not. Since we didn't and changed the RPM, it's still frozen, and it's just a maze to get through. With that said, I should note at this point that there are minor character bios in the manual for each of the 4 main characters, and when I mean minor, they are brief. For instance, Elliot G. Balad is the main character of the game, part of the C-730 Battalion of Easter, a reserve organization specializing in sea disaster rescues. A hot-blooded 28-year-old who loves his job and will help anyone in trouble, is also a big douche. Dogs Bauer is a former heavy weapons expert who took part in the first investigation of Dinosaur Island. At 43, he now operates a ferry service between the mainland and island. Specific details about his past remain unknown. Janine is a 24-year-old genius who was employed by the Dinosaur Island division of Kimra Tech Security. At age 16, she graduated from MIT with a master's degree and is a mastermind into computer technology. Janine has a thorough knowledge of the island's computer system. Also, right here, you need to push this block back in order to reach the key for the door in this room over there. And oddly enough, Nephilim also gets a bio in the manual. A mysterious angel-like entity that appears sometimes to Elliot during his investigation of the island. Nephilim follows Elliot and observes him, but its intentions remain unclear. Nephilim emits a brilliant blue light that illuminates the environment around it. Not that the night light feature ever really comes into play, because honestly, even the darkest rooms in this game, I feel, are well lit enough to the point where you can see. At least if your TV's gamma settings and shit are correct. If they're not, you might have some problems. And even then, some of these rooms were probably just darker on a CRT than they are on any kind of modern display, because CRTs worked radically different than anything we've had in the past 15 years. With that said, that's the end of the freezer, and that's how it could have gone. But now let's head back to the control room to show off the other way this area can unfold. Like I said, the thing you want to do to differentiate the two is insert the invert key and then leave. Don't mess with it at all after that, as the invert key, well, it does what it says rather literally, honestly, in that it inverts the temperature of the freezer. The heating systems, or the cooling systems, are now heating systems. The areas that were once frozen are now superheated. And our temperature gauge, instead of falling, is now rising. If it gets to the top of it, you start taking the same damage at the same rate you did while the place was cold. However, the areas you once used to cool or to warm up will now be used to cool down. Outside of this, the main hallways themselves don't actively change, though, so we're going to cut to the point where things actively change. The frozen area. All the ice has melted into water, allowing us to get introduced to Blue Stinger's horrid swimming controls. The way it works, when you're neutral and not pressing any button, Elliot sinks. You mash the B button on the Dreamcast controller to rise up to the top to get some air if you need to, and to swim, you hold a direction and press the B button. Watch out for your oxygen gauge, though, because the oxygen gauge, while it looks like the temperature gauge, does work a little differently. If you run out of air, your health drains so quick it's basically an instant kill if it happens. With that said, only Elliot can swim whenever the situation presents itself, and he can only fire his handgun while underwater. So make sure you have some handgun bullets on hand during the few times in the game you need to swim. I think there's only like 5 or 6 of them, period. If even, honestly. With that said, be prepared, because the moment we come up to the area where we had to push the ice blocks, the central ice block has melted and was containing a boss fight that just knocked me right back into the previous loading zone. Whoops. This is a very strange bull-like enemy we only see in 2 areas of the game, period. Its main attacks are to charge at you and then swipe its head at you if it's close enough. The napalm gun is still very effective on it, but I think the thing that's supposed to be this particular enemy's weakness is the bow gun that Dogs has, I think. Maybe the acid, laser, or whatever the third gun I can get in the weapon shop in the Hello Market is, or maybe better. But as it stands, the bow gun, as you can see, shreds through the health quickly enough. And you can't bypass this enemy either, as the meat room key is no longer where those ice blocks were when the area was frozen. This boss is now holding it. How it managed to grab that, I don't know. Maybe the original key fell in the water and was considered useless. I don't know. It's not worth considering. Because honestly, I feel like this game doesn't put the most thought into its world building. What a surprise, I know. I do find the freezer interesting. I like areas that have a semi-open enough nature where you can solve it in a couple of different ways. With that said, by and large, leaving the invert key is technically the wrong way to do it, because the boss fight in swimming is the punishment for not doing the puzzle successfully. I do at least like that you can fail it and still clear the area, though. Not too many games do that sort of level design. Also, this is the wrestling shirt. It's, limited. You do this motion, and you move forward slightly. There's a couple of enemies that can work well enough against as a combo, particularly certain humanoids, because it does, I believe, stun them enough, but by and large, you should not be using any of Dogs' close-range weapons outside of the club. With that, though, now we're back to the main footage from when we kept the freezer frozen. And now, welcome to Lab Town proper, and they spam you with the standard health and weapon depots at the vending machines. And hey, I'll always buy some more hassies. Yeah, soda! Don't drink soda, it's awful for you.
Elliot, can you hear me?
Yes. Look, I'm sorry I got distracted. We're finally out of the freezer and about to enter Rat's place. Everything okay up there?
Everything's fine.
Can you hold on a sec?
Go ahead.
Janine.
I don't think she likes you.
That snotty little rat. I'll bet her mother is exactly like her.
You're in a bad mood.
Is Dogs ever in a really good mood, though, Elliot? Although I suppose his gotcha and sound effects whenever you switch to him or his weapons are pretty happy sounding. I guess what I like to say is, Dogs is only happy when there's violence involved. And you know what? Being in this game, I don't blame him. Either way, since we're in Lab Town proper, we can immediately enter this bathroom area that's graffitied to all hell and climb this window behind the toilet for a secret area. This is another area where you can use to grind, because the two enemies in these two bathrooms drop decent money for this point in the game. The main reason you come in here, though, is because in this women's bathroom over by the door is the rail gun that you could have bought for Dogs back at Hello Market. This is why I recommend not buying it. And this is one of Dogs' best weapons in the game, honestly. There's technically one that's no shit better, because his rocket launcher is the most powerful thing in the game. But for a lot of normal enemies and even very specific boss fights, the railgun just does so much damage. Ammo for it's a bit hard to find in the actual world, but it becomes available often enough through vending machines later in the game that it might as well become his new main weapon moving forward. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 5, we're gonna explore Lab Town in depth and finally come across the glory that is Rat's Bar. See you guys then.